Welcome to the Benzino Podcast, where we're calling a spade. Great to be here with you guys today. Candace Parker calls the WNBA players a bunch of jealous, envious
haters. That is how the conversation about the best guards in women's basketball got kicked off this month. Not by some random troll, but by a Hall of Famer out loud on a podcast. So what did those players actually do to earn a word like that? Stay with me, because the number sitting at the center of this is genuinely hard to believe when you see it.
That you guys are going to vote Caitlin Clark as the 11th best guard, not player, guard in the league. Candace Parker said, you ladies need to go to therapy.
11th, when the WNBA released its all-star player voting, Caitlin Clark, a starter, a face of the league, came back as the 11th best guard according to her own peers. Not 11th player, 11th guard. Now the host you're listening to spices it up with lines about doctors and drug tests, so let me be careful and give you what Candace Parker actually said, word for word, because her real version was sharp enough on its own. On her post-moves podcast, sitting right next to Clark's own teammate Aaliyah Boston, Parker called the result crazy and said there need to be actual rules for how players vote because, quote, this is getting out of hand. And keep in mind how this vote is even built. Fans count for 50%, players and media split the other half, so the fans and the media pushed Clark in as a starter. Her fellow players are the ones who buried her at 11. That gap right there is the whole story.
Candace Parker pulls no punches when calling out the WNBA players. Candace Parker also, speaking about the Alyssa Thomas flagrant foul, a lot of former players, a lot of people in the media, they're kind of dancing around the subject. Oh, but it wasn't necessary. Oh, she didn't do it on purpose. Oh, it wasn't intentional. Oh, wasn't it really a flagrant?
And watch how fast she pivots. Parker didn't keep it to the vote. She dragged the Alyssa Thomas play into the same breath, the one half the analysts on television spent days tiptoeing around. Was it necessary? Was it intentional? Was it even really a flagrant? All that careful hedging. Parker's answer sliced right through it. It was a foul, upgrade it, move on. But before we get to what the league decided, you have to actually see what happened on that floor on June 24th, because the replay is the entire argument and it did not happen in a vacuum. 2 nights earlier, these same teams played a chippy, ugly game. 6 technicals and ejection, Clark picking up her 5th technical of the season. The bad blood was already boiling over. Then came Wednesday.
Aaliyah Boston, she chimes in. Aaliyah Boston chimes in and says, that's not a basketball play. That's not a basketball play. You don't put a fist in somebody's throat and damn near stomp them while you're walking over them.
That's Aaliyah Boston, Clark's teammate, saying the quiet part at full volume. You do not drive a fist into somebody's throat while you're stepping over them and call it a basketball play. Here's what the tape actually shows. Second quarter, 6 minutes and 52 seconds on the clock, a scramble for a loose ball. Clark goes down. Thomas, Lexi Held, and DeWanna Bonner all collapse on top of her. And as Clark tries to shove the ball out from underneath the pile, Thomas's closed fist drives into her throat, and then Thomas gets up and steps over her. Live on the floor, 3 officials call nothing at all. The refs later told Fever coach Stephanie White they simply didn't see it. And that no call, not the contact, the no call is the spark that lit this entire fire.
Candace Parker reacts to WNBA players voting Caitlin Clark 11th best guard in the league. Quote, you have some insecurities if you're putting Caitlin Clark as the 11th best guard. Insecurities is putting it politely. Insecurities is putting it politely. Let's hear what Candace Parker had to say.
Insecurities is putting it politely. Sit with that for a second, because that is a heavy thing to say about professional athletes and how they filled out a ballot. So is it fair? Let's not take anybody's word for it. Let's check the actual mechanics, because almost nobody screaming about this vote has bothered to mention them. Only about 85 of the league's 180 players even submitted a ballot, fewer than half, and each of those voters could name only 4 guards. 4. So Clark did not lose some grand head-to-head referendum on her talent. She finished 11th in raw vote totals in a format that caps every single voter at 4 names from a pool where more than half the league didn't vote at all, and she wasn't even alone down there. Kelsey Plum landed 12th, Jackie Young 14th. Does that erase the snub? No, something still looks off, but it reframes what kind of off we're actually talking about.
Owls, or like, I don't know. I think people need to look at themselves in the mirror and realize, like, man, you got some insecurities if you sitting down and putting Caitlin Clark as the 11th best guard. Like, Y'all need to go to a therapist and figure out what childhood issues you have.
Damn, go to a therapist and see what kind of childhood issues you.
And there it is, the exact line that detonated across social media. Parker telling players to look in the mirror and that if they've genuinely got Clark at 11th, they need a therapist to work out what childhood issues they're carrying. That is a real verified quote, not the host embellishing. And the reason it hit like a truck is the box score. Clark is putting up better than 20 points a night, right around 20.5 to 21 with more than 8 assists a game, which is second in the entire league. She's shooting north of 40% from the floor. By raw production, she is a top 3 guard, full stop. The fans saw that and voted her second. The media saw it and voted her third. Her fellow players saw the identical season and voted her 11th. Reporters like Annie Costebal and Christine Brennan flagged the same gap. Costebal, a senior writer at The Athletic, said flat out there's no way Clark is the 11th best guard, and that the players clearly let personal feelings drive the ballot. Even Colin Cowherd, who admitted he was basically laughing at it, pointed out Indiana is scoring around 94 points a game, the most that franchise has managed in 16 years with Clark running the whole thing. So the question was never whether she's a top guard. It's why the people she competes against refuse to say so.
You have, gee. Well, Candace Parker, all due respect, Candace Parker, you were the real deal Holyfield. So you didn't really have a reason to be jealous of anybody in the league. You didn't really have a reason to be envious of anybody in the league. You were the real deal Holyfield. You're a pretty girl. I got nothing to be jealous about anybody in this league.
Now the host frames Parker as untouchable. You were the real deal. You had no reason to be jealous of anybody. And then he swings that straight into the claim that the league is full of people who are. And look, whether you buy the jealousy theory or not, here's the part that actually gives it teeth. This is not the first time a foul on Caitlin Clark has been quietly upgraded after the fact. Last season, when Marina Mabrey was with Connecticut, she picked up a technical against Indiana that the league later bumped all the way up to a flagrant 2. And go back to 2024, when a fan harassed Chennedy Carter as she walked off the team bus, right after Carter shoved Clark during a game. So this pattern, hard contact around Clark, delayed league action, and an ugly fan reaction spilling past the court isn't new. It's a rerun. And every time it airs, it gets a little louder and a little uglier. That's the backdrop Parker is really reacting to, even if she never says it that plainly.
Man, I want those deals. Man, I want that bread. A lot of players in this league that hate her because we all know why. Candace, you don't really have to deal with any of that, right? Tom Brady never felt insecure about Dak Prescott.
And this is the accusation buried underneath all of it. The idea that some players look at Caitlin Clark and don't see a peer. They see a threat. The endorsements, the wall-to-wall coverage, the arenas that sell out the instant her name lands on the schedule. The host grabs a Tom Brady comparison to make the point, and clumsy as it isn't nonsense. The genuinely secure rarely feel a need to knock anyone down, but I'm going to push back on treating that as proven. A low total in a broken 4-name format is not hard evidence of jealousy. It's an ink blot, and everybody reads into it whatever they already believed walking in. So hold that thought, because there is a piece coming later in this story that isn't an ink blot at all. It's on the record, it's messier than any therapy joke, and it's the part that actually deserves scrutiny.
But once we get out of that top 5, top 6 range of players in this league, then the insecurity starts settling in, and then the voting and the jealousy and the hate and the envy, then that really starts seeping in to these players. And that's why we get Caitlin Clark as the 11th best guard in the league.
This is the more careful version of Parker's argument, and honestly it's the stronger one. She's not claiming the whole league snubbed Clark. She deliberately carved out the stars. A player like a Ja Wilson, a Sabrina Ionescu, the ones with nothing left to prove, Parker figures they voted straight. Her theory is that the resentment lives a rung below that, among players fighting for relevance, and that's where the ballots get strange. It's a smart way to make the charge without indicting everyone who picked up a pen, but it slams into the same wall as before. Nobody outside the league office has actually seen the individual ballots, so insecurity stays a theory, a persuasive one sure, but a theory. What is not a theory, what is fully documented, is what the league did after that whistle stayed silent. That part we can prove, so let's go there.
Speaking about Alyssa Thomas' suspension for Caitlin Clark, the flagrant 2 foul, it should have been upgraded to a flagrant 2 and assessed a 1-game suspension. I don't disagree with the call.
Do I think that it should have been upgraded? Yeah, I do. I think it should have been upgraded to a flagrant 2, assessed a 1-game suspension. I don't disagree with the call. I think it should be upgraded.
So here is where the league actually came down, and notice Parker agreed with the ruling completely. After reviewing the game, the WNBA upgraded that no call all the way to a flagrant 2, suspended Thomas for 1 game and fined her $1,000 for what they officially termed a non-basketball act. Thomas served the suspension that Saturday on the road against the Toronto Tempo. And here's a detail that got buried under all the yelling. Across 13 years in this league, that was the first suspension of Alyssa Thomas's entire career. This is not some serial offender with a file an inch thick. Fever coach Stephanie White, for her part, wasn't satisfied even with the upgrade. She'd spent the whole offseason, in her words, asking the league for one thing: consistency, and she pointed out that a separate reckless closeout on the very same night, the one that actually hurt Clark's back, never got upgraded at all. She called them 2 cheap shots. Which is exactly why what happens next matters so much, because the story refused to stay about the play. It became about something Thomas said off the court, and that is where the facts get genuinely complicated.
The lack of coming out and actually talking about the things that are happening after things were assessed, like Alyssa Thomas, right? She was loud and proud about saying she didn't hear that she was being suspended until almost 10 minutes before the game.
Now, I don't believe that. Now, I don't believe that at all, because Alyssa Thomas also said that since the incident, she hasn't heard from Kathy Engelbert, and then come to find out, reported by Alexa Filippo, her and Kathy have been texting this entire time. Her and Kathy were communicating through text message this entire...
Okay, this is the piece I promised you, the one that's actually anchored in reporting instead of vibes. Thomas went in front of cameras and said she still hadn't heard a single word from Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, that the league had left her out to dry. It was loud, it was public, and it painted Engelbert as completely absent. And then ESPN's Alexa Filippo reported the other half of it. Multiple sources say Engelbert and Thomas had actually exchanged texts the week before, and that Engelbert had directed league security to link up with the Mercury's security team the moment she heard about the threats. USA Today's reporting piled on, saying Engelbert had even offered Thomas a phone call. So there is a real, provable gap between we've heard nothing from Kathy and what those sources describe happening behind the scenes. That is a fair thing to hold up to the light. Not because Thomas is some cartoon villain, but because when a very public claim and the paper trail point in different directions, that's exactly the kind of thing worth asking about. But here's my line, and I am not crossing it. I am not going to pretend the thing she was reacting to wasn't real, because it absolutely was, and I can show you why.
That are important, but the other ones, we can't still ignore. Like, the league has to come out and say, we don't condone that. Like, we don't condone death threats.
The league actually doesn't have to come out and say that. That's where we disagree. The league actually doesn't have to come out and say that. You don't see Roger Goodell coming out and saying that. You don't see Adam Silver coming out and saying that. You don't see Rob Manfred coming out and saying that.
And this is where I break hard from the take you just heard. Whether a commissioner is obligated to fire off a public statement, that's a fair debate. Leagues genuinely handle it differently, and reasonable people land in different places. But the idea drifting around that the threats themselves were invented, make-believe, some kind of victim performance, that is just false, and the record could not be clearer. Alyssa Thomas said on the record that she received death threats and was called racial slurs, that people were leaking addresses online. Engelbert put out a statement condemning, quote, any and all forms of hate, and here's the fact that should end the argument cold. Caitlin Clark herself, the player at the very center of this whole thing, stood up and denounced the hate aimed at Thomas and other players and flatly called the harassment unacceptable. Think about that for a second. When the person you claim to be defending is personally telling you to stop, the "it's all fake" story collapses on the spot. You are completely allowed to think the foul was ugly and the 11th place vote was a joke, and still refuse to pretend the threats never happened. Grown-up analysis holds both of those at once. Anybody selling you only one half is selling you something.
Now, you know what I'm going to say to you, Aaliyah Boston? Then you better not give Alyssa Thomas no dap when you see her on Thursday. Tell that to all you Indiana Fever players. Don't give her a dap. Don't high-five her. Don't hug her. Don't try to touch her on the butt while you guys are saying hello in the center court. No. Stand up for your teammate. Actually show a backbone. Actually show a spine.
Which drags us all the way back to the challenge that actually cuts through the noise. Put your money where your mouth is. If a teammate takes a shot like that, do you stand up for her out loud where it costs you something, or do you post a nice message and go quiet when it counts? That test runs in every direction here. It runs at the players who left Clark at 11 and won't explain it. It runs at the ones piling on Thomas over what she called a complete accident. And it runs straight at a league stuck between saying player safety is paramount and a slice of its own fan base threatening people's lives over a basketball game. Engelbert felt exactly how thin that ice is a few nights later. She walked out to hand the Commissioner's Cup trophy to New York, and the building booed her so hard she could barely get her words out over the noise. That is a commissioner losing the room in real time in front of everybody. So strip away the therapy jokes, the outrage edits, and the mocking, and you are left with one honest question. Was Caitlin Clark voted 11th because of basketball, or because of everything wrapped around her that has nothing to do with basketball? Tell me exactly where you land down in the comments and be specific because I actually read them. If this breakdown handed you the full picture instead of just the loudest half, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe so the next one finds you, and I'll see you on the next breakdown.